Hello everyone, I'm Deb and this is DB Designs in Sewing Australia. I've had a few requests from subscribers asking me if I could show you how I raise the neckline on a V-neck top or a V-neck dress. And so I'm going to do that today. And the first one we're going to do is a top that is cut on the fold and it has a facing in the neck. Because remembering, whatever you do to a neckline, if it's got a facing, you've got to do the same thing to the facing. So facing should be a mirror image of your top's neckline. So we're going to do the Atelier Jupe Zoey Blouse. Now this is a pretty blouse, but it can be quite low cut. So that's an image of the blouse there. So let's get started. If you haven't used an Atelier Jupe pattern before, it comes on pretty much 80 GSM card, probably 80 or 100 GSM. And for instance, this is the front piece here, and this is the bottom of the front piece. So you will always need to trace out, and it's on the back and the front of the paper. So it's just one sheet, so you will always need to trace off this pattern. And I think the Stina skirt was the same. You sort of jigsawed it together. But having said that, it's actually a really nice pattern and a very simple top. So we are going to need a few tools to do this. A ruler. I have a long ruler and a short ruler. I also have a curved ruler, which is really not necessary. But I've got a lot of rulers because I do pattern making. A pencil. A pair of paper scissors. Some sticky tape. And my pattern piece, which you can see I've already got the dart leg folded up in. Now this is traced out in a size 40. So I will often cut one leg of my darts and fold the other one up so that when I lay it on the fabric, I can trace out my dart really easily. If it's in a much heavier paper, I might cut the entire dart out, but this is only in actual tracing paper, so I don't cut it out and I actually reinforce it with sticky tape so that it doesn't tear. So it's got reinforcement on that corner so that it doesn't tear. So I've got that pattern piece cut out and I have got my facing piece cut out, and I have got more tracing paper. So let's get started. So I've decided that I should use some heavier white paper so that you can see it more easily. The first thing we're going to do is, with your new piece underneath, is to trace off the pattern piece. So the really important thing here is making sure you have got your center front seam correct. And while we're here, we may as well mark off what 2 centimeters is. So if that's the point there, our 2 centimeters is here. Now we're just going to draw in the original neckline. We're drawing in the original shoulder. So here we've got, when we take it away, you can see this is our center front fold. This is our curve. This is our V-neck as it is now. This is where we want the V-neck to be. So it's up 2 centimetres higher. And our shoulders are in place. Now the method I use for this is I hold this corner of the shoulder and I pivot up to this so that my line is touching that 2 centimetre mark. And now I'm redrawing in the curve. And so now when we drop it back to its original place, you can see here's our new pattern. So I would tape this in place and cut out my new pattern piece. Now, if you wanted to just cut out a whole new pattern piece, like trace over this, that's fine. So there is our new neckline raised up. It's a really, really easy way to do it. Remember, we're holding that corner here. We're pivoting up. And when you're doing it, you're thinking, but then the center fold is not in the center and it's on an angle. But then you're dropping it back down and you're making this the new piece. It's just an inserted piece on the pattern. Hasn't ruined my pattern. But as I said, you can just trace it out. And if you do the pivot method for a V-neck, you're making sure that you don't have to redo the shoulders in any way. So that's how I do that one. And now when we're thinking about the facing, remembering that our facing fits our old piece, our old pattern piece, which is here. So, same thing. So there are several ways you can do a facing. You can just get a piece of tissue paper and cut a whole new facing. Remember, our facing should replicate our pattern piece. So if you wanted to cut a whole new facing, and our facing is 7 centimetres wide, then with tissue paper, we would trace around here 7 centimetres down and make a whole new facing. Or we can use the same method that we used for our other pattern piece. Just tracing it out. And we want to be 2 centimetres higher, which is here. So we would hold on to this piece at the corner, allowing it to pivot up. redraw in our line. And there you would have your new pattern piece. And I would then also remembering that our facing is 7 centimeters wide, because now all of a sudden it's much bigger than that. So when we look at the depth of our facing here at the center point, it is actually 9 centimeters. So what we'd really be doing is reducing this by 2 centimeters. You can just recurve that. And you can keep going over that until you get a really smooth effect. And that would be our new facing. And you could just cut that out. And that's your new facing. Now, the other way to do the facing is to lay your pattern piece over your pattern. And this goes for any top you want to make that doesn't have a facing. Say you've got a top that's got a bias neckline and you think, I really want a facing because I want it to look, you know, smarter than that. So what you can do is you can just make your own facing. So facing is a replica of your pattern piece. So when you're thinking, oops, I break everything. So we're just drawing this facing in, and I think at the shoulder it was 7 centimeters, so we would just draw in to the 7 centimeter mark. It's quite a deep facing, and I think the old one here was like at over 9 centimeters. Ooh, it's very deep. But I must admit it sits quite nicely, this facing. And so then you're just making marks. All the way along. And I'm just joining up all of those dots so that it gets a pretty smooth effect. So I don't think I usually do a facing that is that deep. Generally speaking, I would probably only do it because I don't really like the curve of that either. So it doesn't really matter. It's on the inside, and this will be your fold. And so the main thing is that it is a replica of your pattern piece, because at the end of the day, it's got to fit onto it. So if we cut this one out, it's something I do with a lot of patterns many a time after the fact I've done it, when I've thought, I don't think that facing fits very well into that top. is to measure the facing piece or lay the facing piece onto the actual pattern piece, because it should be a replica. Now sometimes that in a button up that can change, because sometimes the facing is slightly different when it comes to the edges where it meets. So now when we're looking at our facing piece that we've just made and our pattern piece, we can see they match perfectly. So there are two ways of doing the facing. I think this is my preferred way because I actually think it's faster than doing it the other way. The other way worked. And I'll just cut this one out so that you can see that it also matches up with our top. So that center front fold, there's our new facing. So the facings are really easy to do, and to create your own facing is easy to do. You do not need to be a pattern maker to make a facing for something that does not already have a facing. Remember, it's just an image that's only yay wide. This is quite a wide facing. It's really your preference as to how wide your facing is. Sometimes it's to do with the top stitching that you may do on your garment after you finished it. But when I went to pattern making school, so when I went to fashion design school, we always did 5 centimetre, which would have brought it to here. So my facing would have been this wide. Yeah, so that is my preferred width of a facing, which is 5 centimetres. And that's just probably because that's what I was taught. But now I've got 2 facings for this top. Of course, you need to go and you need to put all your markings on if you're going to have new pattern pieces. So if you was going to use this one, and I would put all the markings that the old one had on it. And by all means, you can just make new pattern pieces so they're not all scribbled all over and sticky taped together, which mine often are. But I will leave mine like that because I know full well on this top that I need to alter the shoulders. So that's how you raise the V-neck on a fold top. You can use that pivot method. You don't need to pull it up, redraw anything, redraw shoulders into anything if you use that method. So to demonstrate how to raise a button-up front top, how to raise the neckline of a button-up top, I have gone with the Birdie Jumpsuit, and I've actually done the, I think they've called it a round neck, but you can call it a round neck or a crew neck. And from where it goes to, you probably may not need to raise it very much, but it actually depends on your body shape, quite frankly. So here's the pattern piece here. Once again, you can see I've got the dart and I've taped over those so that they don't rip. And here's my facing. Now what you'll notice straight off about the facing is that it doesn't match exactly. It's not all the way to the, if we started here, it's completely different. So if we start at the shoulder, we can see that it comes not even quite to the center front line. So this is the center front here. That's the center front line there. See, it's got the center front written there. And there's a fold line. So what you need to remember about a facing is if we have the fold line there and we folded it back across our fabric, stitched it in, flipped it over, we don't need all this bulk for all of this coming to the fold line, or what's worse, going all the way out to the edge. When you're thinking about, sometimes buttonholes are really, really hard to do because there's so much bulk under them. Well, this eliminates some of that bulk because we can already see where the buttonholes are going to be in this top. We want to, and I'm sure everyone's had that issue, where there's so much bulk under the buttonhole, there is no way you can get the buttonhole in there. Sometimes it's on a shirt collar and sometimes it's on the stand of the collar. So it all needs to be trimmed really, really well. That's just a bit of a tip if you wanted to reduce bulk in things. But when we're looking at this facing, we're matching up the shoulders. And this does not come to the center front. And remembering this piece folds over here like this, and you can see that all lines up. So how do we increase the neckline for this one? Now I have altered this pattern slightly. You can see it's got a little piece of paper taped underneath it. Now that's because I wasn't happy with the neckline, because I believe, and from pattern making, when you fold this back, it needs to be meeting. It should be a reflection of itself. So that should be exactly as it was. I mean, it gets trimmed away. It would have been trimmed away when the neckline was made. So to ensure that your stitching line is perfect, I added that piece, just a tiny piece. It's a slither. As you can see, it's a slither. That blue line is where the actual pattern piece was, and I added this tiny bit of paper on here because it can all get trimmed away later. That's not the point. The point is, when I folded this over like this, if that didn't match, I may try to make it match, and I don't want to have to make things match, because that's when you start to run into trouble. And so if I'd forced this to come higher, then this whole center front bit is going to be not in the center front. It's going to throw the straight grain off. So when I don't know if that's something that happened in the print, if the pattern is like that, I don't know. It certainly was not like that on the V-neck, because it's something that I test, right? So I test that in my patterns, because when you've got fold lines, you should be able to fold your pattern piece and it should match exactly. You know, my bottom should be matching my top, like everything just should be. If I'm going to fold this back in here, then that needs to match up perfectly and the bottom needs to match up perfectly. So that's why I've got that added little piece there. But to raise this neckline, we're going to do a very similar thing. Now this has got a lot more markings on this pattern piece. It's a little bit bumpy because I'm only going to raise it up by 1 centimetre. And remembering I've got that new mark there. So this is going to be my 1 centimetre mark. Going to do the same thing that I did before. Now this is cut out in a size 10, this pattern. Because I figured nobody else is going to want me to make them one of this. It would be an unusual thing for a client to ask me to make them something like this. Usually as dresses or things to wear to weddings and that sort of thing. So I'm just extending those marks so I know where they are, so that when the pattern alters, we know where they're supposed to be. So once again, holding onto the shoulder and pivoting this piece up only to the 1 centimetre mark, we are going to draw in a new line. So if we put it back where it was, this is now oops, I should have drawn that, obviously, all the way. So that is going to be where our pattern piece comes to now. And so you can see it mirror images that little kick that I made when I extended the pattern piece. So now if we cut this out, so remembering that we had that fold line, so here's our fold line, and to make sure that the pattern is perfect, here it is here, and you can see it's still got that little bit of a kick out. If you remember that it had that little kick out piece, and it's still got that. That's mirrored onto this one. So now we've got our pattern piece done, 1 centimetre. We need to alter our facing. So in this case, I am much more inclined just to cut a whole new facing piece. So here is my piece of paper that I'm going to use for my facing. And when I look at this facing, let's see how wide this one is. Oh, it's 6.5 centimetres wide. It's 6.5 centimetres wide everywhere. Okay, so the first thing we do, start by tracing it. It's exactly the same as the piece underneath. So when we look at our old line, our facing came to here. So 6.5 centimetres. So you can add your curves in any way you want. I'm just going to join up these dotted lines. Just measuring out 6.5 centimetres from the upper edge of the facing. So that would be our new facing. We would actually add where all of our markings were. So what we can see from this facing is because we've raised the neckline, we've actually made the neckline shorter, and so the old facing is longer than the new facing. That the grain line is in accordance with that centre front piece, which is what would match to the centre front. So if we cut this out, so this is our new one. If we lay it on the old one, shoulders are still all in the same position. We can see that it is a bit shorter than the original. And that's to be expected because we brought the neckline up. So the neckline is actually shorter than it used to be, not just in length from here, but in this line that goes from your centre front to your shoulder, it is shorter. So our facing needs to be shorter. So the pivot method is the quick method I use to raise a neckline. It is not the method my pattern making teacher would have approved of, because he would say, just make the pattern again, Deb. So that is my quick method of raising a neckline on a V-neck or on a button-up neck. And the main thing to remember is if I change something that has a facing on it, I need to change the facing. So even if that's lowering a neckline, raising a neckline, whatever it is you're doing, you need to take into account that if it's got a facing, your facing will also need to be changed. So that's the method I use as a fast method. It's not a method my fashion design teacher who taught me pattern making would approve of. He would say, remake the pattern, Deb, and redraw that line in. But this is my fast way of doing it. So that was my quick way of raising the neckline on a V-neck on the fold and on a crew neck or a round neck that's a button-up. So a button-up, remembering, can be a little bit trickier, remembering where those fold lines are, and remembering that this is a button-up that also has a facing. And so our facing didn't alter much, but it altered a little bit. But that is a really fast way of raising necklines. Now, if you're cutting out brand new patterns, make sure your center front fold is exactly right and exactly straight. And if it's something that's cut out not on the fold, make sure you have got your straight grain line on there, because you can't go altering those things. The garment's going to be twisted when you wear it. Remember, the straight grain's there for a reason, and that is so that none of your garment is on the bias. If it's on the bias, it's going to warp slightly. And even just off the straight grain, it's going to warp slightly. And I'm sure we've all had that experience with t-shirts that we've bought and worn once and they were fabulous, and then we've washed it and all of a sudden it's twisted and there's a bit of the front at the back on that side and a bit of the back at the front on that side. That's because it's not on the straight grain. And it happens on knits as well as being on wovens. But that's how you do that. I hope that was helpful. Please feel free to ask me any questions you have. These are both patterns I've used before. Remembering that method of your darts. Now this dart is just drawn from the pattern, and I've slashed one of the dart legs open and folded the other one. Now if it's in a really heavy paper, I will sometimes cut it out completely. I will still reinforce it with sticky tape at the point so it doesn't tear, but I just find it much easier to transfer the dart markings onto my fabric if it's got, you know, if the space is there. So that's all from me today. Let me know if you've got any questions. Please like and subscribe, and I will talk to you all soon. Bye.